This is the story of a sniper who can hit a target from miles away, even with a blindfold over his eyes. But he wasn't always a sniper. He used to be an ordinary math teacher. He hated war and was terrified of weapons. At that moment, nothing in his life suggests the nightmare that is about to begin. But one day, everything changes. A single event transforms him from a calm, peaceful teacher into a ruthless sniper. The story begins in a small village in Ukraine. There is a small house where a married couple lives. They are living a happy and simple life together. The man's name is Mykola, and his wife's name is Nastya. Nastya is an artist who carves beautiful statues out of wood. Mykola teaches math at a local school. He is well liked by almost every student except one boy named Ivan. Ivan is rude and constantly causes trouble in class. He comes from a wealthy family, while Mykola is poor. Every day feels normal, but the tension around him is already growing. Because of that, Ivan often mocks Mykola's appearance and clothes. He wants Mykola to lose his temper and hit him, so he can file a complaint and get him fired. But Mykola is incredibly patient. He never lets Ivan's behavior affect him and continues living his life peacefully. Mykola doesn't own any electronic devices, so he rarely hears news from the outside world. Then one day, while he is at school, he hears a report on television. Russia has invaded Ukraine. The news lasts only moments, but its consequences will last forever. The report says that many soldiers have already been killed and that Russian forces have captured several areas. That evening, when Mykola returns home, he learns that Nastya is pregnant. For the first time in a long while, the future feels bright and full of hope. The news fills him with joy. Together, they celebrate the moment. The next morning, Mykola rides his bicycle to school. On the way, he notices two soldiers standing beside the road, smoking cigarettes. Their uniforms look unfamiliar. They don't resemble Ukrainian soldiers at all. At first, Mykola assumes the military may have changed its uniforms and continues on his way. When he arrives at school, the building is completely empty. No students have shown up. Instantly, something feels wrong. A quiet feeling settles in, warning him that something is terribly off. Then he sees another news report on television. Russian troops have already entered Ukraine. Suddenly, he realizes the soldiers he saw earlier were Russian. A wave of fear hits him. He immediately thinks about Nastya and rushes home, but by then, it is already too late. When Mykola arrives, he sees the same two soldiers attacking his wife. He tries to protect her, but they beat him as well. Desperate, he begs them to stop. "Please, don't hurt my wife. She's pregnant." But mercy is the last thing those men came looking for. The soldiers ignore his pleas and continue beating both of them. Then they search the house. When they fail to find anything useful inside, they become furious. What happens next destroys everything Mykola has ever loved. Before leaving, they set the house on fire. Watching her home burn, Nastya is overwhelmed with anger. She grabs a rock and throws it toward the Russian soldiers. The moment she does, one of them opens fire. Nastya dies instantly. Mykola feels the ground disappear beneath him. He rushes to her side, pulls her into his arms, and breaks down in tears. The pain is so overwhelming that even breathing feels impossible. A few hours later, two Ukrainian soldiers arrive. When they see Nastya's condition, they are deeply saddened. They place a hand on Mykola's shoulder and tell him not to give up. Then, they begin digging a grave for Nastya. After finishing, they tell Mykola that he can lay his wife to rest there. After her death, Mykola is completely shattered. He is now utterly alone. The Russian soldiers didn't just take his wife, they also took his unborn child and destroyed his home. Now, only one thing remains inside him: revenge. He is determined to find and kill the Russian soldier who pulled the trigger and murdered his wife. And in that moment, a peaceful teacher begins turning into something far more dangerous. There is only one path to revenge that Mykola can see. The man who once feared violence now believes war is his only answer. He begs the two Ukrainian soldiers to take him with them. He tells them he wants to join the Ukrainian army and fight for his country. The soldiers agree and bring him to a military base. Before leaving, Mykola takes a small wooden statue made by Nastya. She had carved it to protect him. It is one of the few things he has left of her. When they arrive at the base, the commanding officer is immediately unhappy to see him. He gets angry at the two soldiers and refuses to let Mykola enlist. To the officer, Mykola looks less like a recruit and more like a risk. The officer suspects that he could be a spy, but after questioning the soldiers and hearing Mykola's story, he begins to understand the truth. Mykola explains how Russian soldiers brutally killed his wife and burned down his home. He says he no longer has any reason to live the life he once had. Now he has only one purpose: to fight for his country and destroy the enemy soldiers responsible for everything he lost. With every word he speaks, the officer's suspicion slowly begins to fade. Eventually, the officer agrees to let Mykola join the Ukrainian army. The battle for revenge cannot begin until he survives the battle of training. The very next day, his military training begins. Because Mykola is an ordinary civilian, the training is incredibly difficult for him. His entire life has been spent teaching math. He has no experience with weapons. While the other recruits quickly quickly assemble their rifles, Mikola falls behind. He is always the last one to finish. Watching this, one officer becomes convinced that Mikola will never make a good soldier, but Mikola refuses to quit. Every failure becomes another reason for him to keep pushing forward. He throws himself into training and works harder than anyone else. Even late at night, while the other soldiers are asleep, Mikola continues practicing and studying. One evening during training, he asks his superior not to call him by his real name. Instead, he says his call sign is Raven. The moment he says it, everyone bursts out laughing. The officer explains that a call sign is not something you simply choose for yourself. It has to be earned through a major achievement in service to the country. Mikola listens quietly and says nothing. Instead of taking the laughter personally, he turns it into motivation. He trains even harder than before. Then one day, the officer gathers the recruits and tells them that the military is facing a shortage of snipers. More snipers are needed if they are going to stand against the Russian forces. The announcement changes everything for Mikola in an instant. The officer asks who wants to become a sniper. Several recruits stand up. Mikola is one of them. The second he stands, the other soldiers start laughing again. The officer tells him he is nowhere near ready to become a sniper. He points out that Mikola still struggles with basic weapon assembly and disassembly. Becoming a sniper is on an entirely different level, but Mikola refuses to back down. He says he can become a great sniper. All he needs is one chance to prove himself. For the first time, he is no longer asking for sympathy. He is demanding an opportunity. The officer decides to test him. He hands Mikola a rifle and says he must assemble it in only 20 seconds. Without hesitation, Mikola places a blindfold over his eyes. Then he takes the weapon apart and puts it back together with incredible speed. It takes him only 18 seconds. Everyone is stunned. The same people who laughed at him moments earlier begin applauding him instead. The officer is impressed and officially accepts him into sniper training. The room that mocked him moments ago is now forced to respect him. During training, Mikola receives an older rifle, while the others are given newer and more advanced weapons. He asks for a modern rifle as well. The officer tells him that if he wants a better weapon, he will have to earn it. With no other choice, Mikola accepts the rifle he is given and walks away. Later, the officer teaches the recruits one of the most important rules of sniping. A sniper never abandons his position. He locks onto the target and waits. Patience, not the rifle, is what truly makes a sniper deadly. During the exercise, the instructor fires live rounds near the trainees. Any sniper who moves from their position is immediately removed from training. The lesson is simple. Fear can move your body, but a sniper cannot afford to move at all. When it is Mikola's turn, he doesn't flinch even once. He keeps his rifle steady and stays locked on target. Because of that, he passes the exercise. The next test is even harder. The target is shown only once. After that, a black screen blocks the trainee's view, and they have to estimate the shot from memory. Some of the recruits pass. Mikola does not. His rifle is old, and the shot misses. With a newer weapon, it likely would have been accurate, but training continues. Failure slows him down for a moment, but it never changes his direction. The next challenge is the toughest yet. The snipers must fire using only the light from a flare during the darkness of night. The instructor launches a flare into the sky. Everyone takes their shot. Every single recruit misses, except Mikola. In fact, he never fires when the flare first appears. He realizes that shooting directly in the brief light is nearly impossible. Instead, he uses those few seconds to calculate the target's distance. Using his knowledge of mathematics, he makes the adjustment and takes a perfectly precise shot. What looked impossible to everyone else becomes a calculation in Mikola's mind. The instructor and the other soldiers are stunned. No one has ever completed the task successfully before. Mikola is the first person to do it. For the first time, the quiet math teacher stands out among trained soldiers. The instructor is deeply impressed and finally grants him the call sign he wanted from the beginning, Raven. Time passes, and Mikola continues training with complete dedication. Eventually, the day arrives when the final results are announced. The colonel salutes him and informs him that he has passed the test. A few days later, the colonel approaches him and tells him to pack his gear. They have been assigned a mission. Training is over. Now every decision carries real consequences. Intelligence reports say that Russian soldiers have taken control of a checkpoint. This is where the real story begins. Soon, Mikola and his team arrive at the location and move into position. They are preparing to engage the Russian soldiers when a vehicle suddenly appears in the distance, heading toward the checkpoint. The colonel immediately orders everyone to hold their fire. The Russian soldiers stop the vehicle and order the passengers to step outside. They inspect the passports and search the entire vehicle. Everything appears normal, so they allow the civilians to leave, but they keep the passports. When the passengers ask for them back, the soldiers begin treating them aggressively, and that is the moment the colonel decides enough is enough. The order to fire is given. In a single instant, silence gives way to deadly precision. Every sniper eliminates their assigned target. The mission is a success. When the team returns to base, Mikola notices that several of his fellow soldiers are missing. Concerned, he asks where they are. He is told they have been deployed on another another mission. The following day, devastating news arrives. Several of those soldiers have been killed. The battlefield has introduced a new threat, one far deadlier than expected. They were taken out by a single Russian sniper. His name is Sergei. He is considered one of the most dangerous snipers in the Russian military. A few days later, Mykola and his team head out on another operation. After arriving, they plant landmines throughout the area and take up defensive positions. Soon, Russian soldiers enter the zone. Among them is Ivan, the same student who used to torment Mykola back in school. Now, he is fighting for the Russian army. When the colonel gives the order to shoot, Mykola hesitates. He does not want to aim directly at his former student, but after a brief moment, he pushes aside his emotions and fires at the landmines instead. Sometimes, the hardest target is not an enemy, it is a memory. A massive explosion erupts. Within seconds, the battlefield is consumed by fire, smoke, and destruction. Ivan and the other Russian soldiers are killed instantly. Once everything settles down, the colonel angrily asks Mykola what he was thinking when the order was given. Mykola explains that one of the soldiers was his former student. He did not want to harm him directly. The colonel listens and then gives him a harsh reminder. Ivan is no longer his student. He is the enemy. Joining the Russian army was Ivan's own decision. War leaves no room for the relationships people once had. The colonel tells him there is no reason to feel guilty. After the mission, everyone returns to base camp. By now, the colonel has complete trust in Mykola. He spends much of his time with him. One day, the colonel shows Mykola a photograph of his family. He explains that he has a wife and 2 daughters. His daughters do not know that he is a soldier. Instead, they believe he runs a business. His wife has helped keep the secret from them. Later, Mykola shares his own story. He tells the colonel how Russian soldiers took away the woman he loved. As he recounts everything that happened, emotions begin to overwhelm him. Some wounds survive every battle because they exist far beyond the battlefield. The colonel stands beside him, offering support and reminding him to stay strong. The next morning, the team heads out on a new mission. This operation is important, but for Mykola, it is about to become deeply personal. Intelligence reports suggest that a group of Russian soldiers will be moving through a specific route. The colonel and Mykola arrive early and take up their positions. After a while, they spot 2 Russian soldiers waiting for the rest of their unit to arrive. Then, Mykola recognizes one of them. It is the same man who harmed his wife. The man responsible is standing right in front of him. Mykola immediately asks for permission to engage. The colonel refuses. Years of grief, anger, and loss suddenly collide in a single moment. Mykola can barely contain his rage. After all, revenge is the reason he joined the army in the first place. He asks for permission again. The answer is still no. This time, he loses control of his emotions. Because of his actions, the enemy becomes aware of their position. The colonel angrily demands to know what he was thinking, but the situation gets even worse. They discover that the enemy's most dangerous sniper is nearby. His name is Sergei, and now he knows exactly where they are. The hunter they have feared for months is finally looking directly at them. The colonel immediately begins searching for Sergei's position, but he is too late. Before he can react, he suffers a devastating hit. The colonel is killed. At that moment, Mykola realizes the terrible mistake he has made. The mission is no longer falling apart. Everything already has. Because of what happened, the colonel is gone. The enemy now knows their location, and the situation is rapidly spiraling out of control. Mykola decides to retreat. He carries the colonel and moves toward a safer area. After a difficult escape, he finally manages to get out of enemy territory. Then, he returns directly to base. The colonel's death weighs heavily on him. He blames himself for everything. Guilt becomes a burden far heavier than any weapon he has ever carried. At that moment, he makes a promise. No matter what happens, he will stop Sergei. Sometime later, Mykola receives intelligence about 2 enemy snipers. He immediately heads out on another mission. After reaching the location, he patiently waits. Before long, he successfully takes down 1 enemy sniper. But during the engagement, the second sniper wounds him. Despite the injury, he refuses to quit. Gathering every bit of strength he has left, he eliminates the second threat as well. Now his condition is serious, so he withdraws to a secret base and begins recovering. While resting there, he receives a call from an army major. The next piece of information will bring him 1 step closer to his true target. The major tells him they have finally identified the sniper responsible for targeting the colonel. Mykola immediately returns to base. There, the major gathers everyone and begins explaining who the sniper really is. His name is Sergei. He is considered one of Russia's most experienced and dangerous snipers, and his shots almost never miss. The major continues briefing the team. Every detail paints the picture of an opponent unlike any they have faced before. He explains that Sergei has already taken out several of Ukraine's best snipers. Underestimating him would be a massive mistake. Sergei is also known for recording his kills and using the footage to spread fear. The major adds that Sergei rarely changes positions. Instead, he prefers operating from a single strategic location where he can monitor the entire area. After hearing everything, the team begins planning their next move. To defeat defeat a sniper like Syrii, precision alone is not enough. Strategy is everything. According to the plan, 2 teams are created. The first team will create a distraction from the front. The second team will apply pressure from behind. Meanwhile, Mykola will quietly enter the building. His objective is simple: reach Syrii. After finalizing the strategy, everyone moves toward the target location. Once there, each sniper takes up position. Mykola carefully enters the building. Inside, he spots 2 enemy soldiers talking to each other. Without making a sound, he clears the path and continues forward. Then, at the exact planned moment, he sends the signal to his team. The second the signal is received, the teams outside launch their operation. At the same time, Syrii senses that something is wrong. One of his men has stopped reporting in. He immediately becomes alert. For the first time, the predator begins to realize that someone is hunting him back. Syrii immediately rushes to the roof of the building. For the first time, the legendary sniper realizes that something has gone terribly wrong. When he gets there, he sees that the sniper who was already stationed on the rooftop is no longer a threat. The sight instantly puts him on edge. Syrii quickly understands what is happening. Sometime later, the backup team sent to assist Syrii arrives at the location. They have no idea that everything is already over. When they attempt to establish contact, the response comes from Mykola instead. The mission has already been decided, and the battlefield now belongs to Ukraine. After that, the Ukrainian snipers take complete control of the area. One by one, every remaining threat is neutralized. A few days after the mission, Mykola visits his wife's grave. He has finally fulfilled the promise he made to her. The people responsible for the suffering of both his wife and the colonel have been stopped. Standing in front of her grave, Mykola makes another vow. He promises that he will continue serving his country for the rest of his life. Then, he quietly walks away. And with that, the story comes to an end. If stories like this stay in your mind long after they're over, subscribe to KTS Mosan, because survival isn't always the end of the story. Sometimes, it's where the real nightmare begins.